Hello and welcome back to Amir Khan Project Management Academy. In today's video, we will learn how to create activities using the Primavera P6. If you have watched my previous video, so we created the WBS diagram for our project and we defined the budget and the timeline for each work package as well. So this is the WBS diagram that we have created. And now what we will do, we'll be creating or defining the activities for this project. So we will be focusing on one of the work package. So again, a work package is a deliverable that will be delivered back to the customer. So in the WBS, the lowest level in the WBS diagram is called a work package. So in this case, the payment module, the user interface, or the database, if it is the last component, these are all the work packages. So we will take one of the work package. So we'll take this payment module as the work package and we will define the activities for this work package here. So before we start working on the activities, let's have a quick review that what needs to be done in order to define the activities. So in any project, one of the first thing that we need to do is to finalize the requirements. And once we have finalized the requirements, then the scope statement will be developed, and based on the scope statement, the WBS diagram will be created, and along with the WBS diagram, the WBS dictionary will also be created. So the WBS dictionary contains each and every detailed information for all of the work packages. So again, we have different work packages. So in the dictionary, we will have the resources, the timeline, scope related information. So all the details will be in the dictionary for each and every work package. So once we have the requirements, once we have the scope statement, and we have developed the WBS diagram along with the WBS dictionary, then the next thing that we need to do is to define the activities. Okay, now remember that the sequence is very important. So we must have to do all of these things in the same order. So after the WBS, now we will be defining the activities, and once we will define the activities, we will sequence the activities. And once we will sequence the activities, we will have the network diagram that will be developed automatically by P6, and the network diagram will help us to determine the critical path. So we will look at the critical path once we will have the network diagram. So all of that is part of the sequencing the activities. So once we will sequence the activities, we will define the duration. Okay, we will define the duration, and once we will define the duration based on the network diagram. So basically, once we will sequence the activities, there will be two more important things that we will have to work on. We will have to determine the dependencies among different activities, and also we'll have to work on the relationships, okay, among different activities. Okay, so once we will sequence the activities, as we will be sequencing the activities, we will have to determine the dependencies and the relationships, and then after that we will come to this step, and that is to define the duration for each and every activity. Like activity A will take 2 days, second activity will take 5 days, and so on. And based on that, once we will have the duration, based on that we will have the network diagram. We can have the network diagram right after we have sequenced the activities, but we can do it in the next step as well. So once we will have the duration, then we will look at the network diagram, and based on that we will have the critical path. Now in order to have the critical path, we must have to know the duration for each and every activity. So we will define the duration for each and every activities. So not for the work packages, not for the whole project, but for each and every activities. All right, so for each activity. Okay, so once we will define the duration, after that we will assign the resources for each and every activity, okay, to each activity. Okay, and that will also help us to refine the schedule, because we may have to change the resources, and again, if we'll make any change to the resources, that will directly impact the duration. So resources is important, and once we will do all of that, then we finalize the schedule. Okay, and once we will finalize the schedule, so that will help us to define the baseline, the schedule baseline. So we have a couple of baselines, like we have the schedule baseline, we have the budget baseline, but currently we'll be focusing on the schedule related part. So that will be the schedule baseline, so that we will see in the next video. So in today's video, after the WBS, we will define the activities, we will sequence the activities, and for that we will be working on dependencies and relationships, and then we will be assigning the duration to each and every activity. And once we will do that, we'll be able to look at the network diagram and what is the critical path. So critical path basically allows us to know the total duration for the project in terms of days or weeks, whatever the time unit we want to go for. And then we will be assigning the resources. So that is maybe we'll do in the next video. So we'll be assigning the resources to each activity, and then of course in the next video we'll work on the schedule baseline and how to update or maintain the schedule baseline. So that is what we'll be focusing on, and after that we'll move on to the budget or the cost related part. So that is what needs to be done, and the sequence is important here. So let's go back to P6, and we will be working on the software part, and under the software part we have one work package, which is the payment module. So we have not defined the budget, so let's first assign the budget. So for that, which we already have done for the database and for the graphic design. So remember, we have the total budget of 55,000. 10,000 we assigned on database and 5,000 we assigned on the graphic design, and out of 5,000, 2,000 we further allocated to user interface. So we have selected here the software under the main project, and if we go to the budget summary, so in the budget log, so first we'll go to the budget log, and we will assign, for example, 20,000 to the software part. Okay, and then we'll come down and we will again select payment module and go to the budget log, and we will assign let's say 15,000 to the payment module. So if we go back to the software, we can see here in the budget summary that out of 20,000, 15 has been distributed to payment module, and still 5 is remaining here. And if we select the payment module, so we can see out of 15, nothing has been distributed because there is nothing under the payment module. So that is how we will break down. So we have this WBS ready for the payment module, and now what we will do, we will be defining the activities. That is the main purpose of this video. So to define the activities for your WBS diagram, we'll click here on project and go to activities. So here we have same thing like the WBS diagram. So this is the top of the project, then we have the database, graphic design. Under graphic design we have the user interface, and then we have the software, and under software we have the payment module. So we will be defining the activities for just one work package, that is the payment module. So in order to define the activities, first thing you will do is to make sure that you select the component under which you want to define the activity. So we are defining the activities under payment module, and you need to have the rough idea that how many activities you need to add, like 10, 20, 15, whatever. Okay, so that will speed up the work a little bit. I'll show you how. So again, we have the WBS diagram. Now we are going to define the activities, and remember that the activities are the tasks or the things to do in order to create or complete this payment module. So the activities are the things to do or the tasks. Okay, so to define one activity, we'll just click here on the add button, and again make sure we have selected this payment module. So click here on the add button. So here we have the new activity. We'll change the name, and we have here a small wizard. So what we can do, we can assign the activity ID, we can change the activity name, and then we can go next, anything that we want to change. Okay, so different things are there, but what we will do is to speed up the work, we will first of all check this option which says do not show this wizard again. because we want to add straight away 10-20 different activities, so we don't want this wizard. Okay, so here is the message. Okay, and we'll just click finish. Okay, so we have one activity under the payment module, so we will add, let's say 9 more activities. So we need total 10 activities. So now the wizard will not pop up, so we'll just click on the add button and keep on adding 9 more times. So you can see the activities are being added under the payment module. All right, so how many we have? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So we have total 10. So again, we don't need the wizard, and the reason is that we can enter all the information which were there in the wizard using these tabs. Okay, so we don't need the wizard here. So we have 10 activities or 10 tasks under the payment module. So that's normally how things will be done, that first of all you will add blank activities without any name or anything. So here we have different activities. Once you have added the activities, the second step you will have to do is to give them the names. Okay, so again, we are not currently concerned about the order or the sequence of the activities. We are just giving them the proper names, which we already have in one of the document in Excel sheet, for example. All right, so what could be the different activities that may take place under the payment module? So for example, I'll just write some of the activities. Let's say finalize scope for this module alone, finalizing the scope. Okay, and let's say one of the activity could be user interviews to know their expectations for this module. Okay, DFD, data flow diagrams. So data flow diagrams, or the user interface diagrams, things like that. So data flow diagrams could be another activity that may take place. Then okay, another thing could be hire resources like programmers, for example, and maybe you need to purchase different licenses as well. Purchase license. Okay, another activity could be for example do the coding work, the actual code for this module. Then we have testing. Okay, then we will have the testing of the code. And another thing could be quality control inspection. Quality control inspection, user review or user test, user UA test, user acceptance test. Let's call it user acceptance. User acceptance test. And let's say final approval. Okay, so these are the different tasks that needs to be done in order to complete this module. So we added different activities, and now we are giving them the proper names. So if we go back to the list here, so we have now defined the activities. So once we have defined the activities, the next thing we need to do is to sequence the activities. And in order to sequence the activities, we'll have to work on the dependencies and the relationships. All right, so in order to sequence the activities, what we need to do is, the easy thing is to have different tabs here. So I have here the general tab, I have here the status tab. So currently we will not be working on the status tab, that is mostly will be used during the execution. Resources we don't need right now, but the important ones are the predecessor, successor, or you can just add one tab. So what you will do, you'll right click here on the blank area next to the successor, for example. So you may have different tabs, so you can right click and you can click here on customize activity details, and you can select that which tabs you want to display. All right, so what you can do, you can just bring the successor or the predecessor, these two tabs back. So successor, predecessor, we don't need. What you can do, you can just add one tab which is the relationships, which will include both successor and the predecessor. So now we have general, we have status, we have resources. Let's keep the resources on, and we have relationships, and maybe, yeah, we'll add the summary as well. All right, and risks, we'll see what are the others. Expenses, for example, will need this tab later or not right now. Okay, codes we will see whenever we'll require. So currently we need the general, we need status, we need the resources, relationships, and summary, and we will click OK. So these are the different tabs we have here. And as far as the columns are concerned, you may have different columns, and we will see that how to bring the same columns, how to change these columns in a while. So again, if you have different columns, so you don't need to worry right now. You just need the activity ID, activity name, and then we will see what other columns you may want to add. And these are the different tabs that we currently need. So what we have done, again, we just added the activities and we gave them the proper names. Now what we want to do, we want to define their relationships and dependencies. Okay, so for that we will click here on the relationship. So that will have both the predecessor and the successor. Now the predecessor means the previous activity, and the successor means the upcoming or the next activity. All right, now currently the activities are just like a list, like an Excel sheet, as we can see here. So we need to bring them in the proper order, that which activity will execute first, which one after that, and so on. And that is how the project execution will take place, based on the same order. So what we will do, we will select the first activity. So we will see which is going to be the first activity. So I think that the user interviews is going to be the first activity. So we will select from the list the first activity, and we will now decide that which is the next activity or the successor. So once we have done the user interviews, the next activity, I believe, should be finalize the scope. So we'll come to the successor part and we'll click here on assign, and we'll just increase the size of this window. Yeah, so now we can see all of the activities, and we'll keep this window open on the side. So after the user interview, so remember this is the successor part. So after the user interviews, we will have finalized the scope. So we'll double click. All right, so we'll double click here, so we can see here. All right, and once we will change the view, you will see that the diagram will start building up automatically. So after the finalizing the scope, we will select now finalize scope, and then we will see that which should be the next activity. So let's say after finalizing the scope, the next activity should be to hire the resources, your designing people, your programmers, and then those will be working on the DFD and the other part. So we'll select the finalize scope, and then we will see in the successor part, the next thing should be the hire resource. So double click here on the hire resource. So once we have hired the resources, or let's do one thing, that after we have finalized the scope, we will hire the resources and we will perform another activity at the same time, and that is to purchase the license. So we'll again double click on purchase license. So we have two activities after we will finalize the scope. Now if we close the window and if we change the view, so currently we are on the table view. If we change the view to the activity network, because what we will end up with, the project network diagram. So if we click here on activity network, and if I zoom in a little bit, so we will see that this diagram is automatically taking the shape. So first user interviews, after finalizing the scope, and after that we have two activities at the same time, hiring the resources and purchase license. And for the other activities, the dependencies and the relationships are still to come. So this activity network diagram will automatically take the shape. So let's go back. Now remember, you can also create the relationships using the network diagram. You can I'll show you in one of the activity that you can use these arrows, drag and drop, and create the relationship as well. But for a big network diagram, there is a chance of error. So Again, it depends on your convenience, but I think it is much safer and much easier to use to do it using these windows in the table view. So let's go back to the table view and let's do the relationships for the other activities. So if we go back to the activity network, and this is what we have. So let's do the remaining of the relationships using the arrows, and let's see how this will be done. So after we have hired the resources and we have purchased the license, the next activity that we can perform is, for example, working on the DFD. So if I bring it up a little bit, and what we can do, we can say that after both of these activities we'll have the data flow diagrams, creating any type of diagram. So we'll just drag and drop the arrow here and here as well, because once both the hire resource and the purchase license will be done, only then we will start the DFD. All right, after DFD the coding will take place. So I'll bring it up, and after DFD we will have coding, and then after coding we will have testing. All right, so let's go back, let's change the view and let's do the remaining from the table view. So do you want to save the layout? All right, fine. All right, or if even if we cancel, so the layout will be there. For example, I just canceled, and if we go back, so the diagram is still there. Okay. All right, so let's go back. So we have done up until the coding part. So after coding, so what we will do, we'll select the coding, and after coding what we will have the testing and the quality control inspection. So let's say after coding we'll select the coding and we'll go to the successor. So we'll have both the testing and the quality control inspection. So we'll select both, double click on both. So if you go back to the diagram, so we can see here both. So if I zoom in a little bit, so after coding we have the testing and the quality control inspection, and after that we will have the user acceptance testing. So I'll just drag it onto the right side. So after both of these activities, after testing and the quality control inspection, we will have the user acceptance testing, and then the last one we will have is going to be the final approval. So that will come at the very end once we have obtained the testing, the acceptance from the user. So that will be the final approval. Okay, so let me show you the full diagram. Okay, so that is how the project network diagram looks like. So remember that the project network diagram is the diagram that shows us the sequence of activities or the sequence of execution. So it could be for just one work package, or could be for the whole project as well. So currently we are focusing on just one work package, which is the payment module. So that is how the work will be executed, and each node, each box represents an activity. And what we will do next is we'll be working on the duration, and then we will see how to create the project network diagram. So, and we will see what are the next steps after that. All right, so how to create the project network diagram? For that we'll have to focus on the dependencies, that which activity comes after the other one, which is the next, which is the next. So these are all the dependencies. So let's change the view, let's go back to the table view. Okay, then as we were working on the dependencies, that which activity will come next and so on, there is another important thing which is called the relationships. So if we look at because the tab itself is called the relationships, and within this tab we have one column which is called the relationship in both the successor and the predecessor. So if we look at the relationships, we have 4 type of relationships. So if I click here, so we have this drop down. So we have 4 type of relationships. One of them we have is called FF, which is finish to finish. Then we have FS, finish to start, SF, start to finish, and SS, which is the start to start. All right, now the most commonly used type of relationship we have is the FS, finish to start. So finish to start, if we go back to the network diagram and zoom in again, so finish to start basically means that you will have to finish the current task, only then you can start the next one. Finish, then start. Okay, so finish the diagram, then start the coding. Or for example, finish the user acceptance, only then the final approval can take place. So finish the current activity, only then start the next activity. So FS, or finish to start, this is the most commonly used type of relationship. So in a separate video we'll be discussing the other type of relationships as well, but currently we'll be focusing on this one, the FS, which is the most commonly used type of network relationship. So we have created the project network diagram, and if we look here, so the next thing that we will have to do is to define the duration for each activity, and then we will again review the project network diagram, and then we'll look into the critical path for this project. So once we have created the project network diagram, we will now assign the duration to each and every activity. And for that, what we will do, we'll just try to make sure that we have some columns here. Let's say we'll have here activity ID, activity name, and we need one column which is called the original duration. So if you don't have these columns, you can just right click and you can then go to columns, and you can select which columns you want to add. So I have activity ID, activity name. I will have original duration, that you can find under the duration category. You can add the original duration, and you can also add the remaining duration. And scheduled person complete is not required currently, but if you want, you can add, so you can get it from the person complete. So under the person complete, you can find the scheduled person complete. Then the other column we need is start finish, so that you will find under the dates, start finish, not the actual start, actual finish, just the start and finish, and total float. So these are the columns you need to add. All right, so in order to add or define the duration, there are two ways. One is that you select the activity and you go to the general tab, under the status tab, and in the status tab, you under the duration and in front of the original, you just change the duration. But the easy way is you can do the same directly onto the table. Okay, so let's define the duration, and I will just randomly put any duration for these activities. So let's say for the final scope, let's say to finalize the scope, it will be, for example, 2 days. So I'll just put 2 and press enter. And then we have the user interviews. So again, we can leave it to 5 days, for example, user interviews. And creating the DFD, 2 days. Hiring the resources, maybe just 1 day, for example. All right, purchasing the license, 4 days. For all the others, I'll just put 4 days. So coding will take 4 days, testing will take 4 days, or you can leave it 5 days as well. It doesn't make any difference. So quality control, let's put it just 2 days. User acceptance, just 1 day, and final approval, also 1 day. So here we have different durations for different activities. So what you can do, you can just go double click and put the duration, and the duration are in days, because in settings we can change that the duration are in days, weeks, or hours, but we are using the days as the duration unit. And the total duration we are having is 5 days, and the reason is because each and every activity is starting on the same date, and that's because we have not yet created the project schedule. So once we will run the schedule, then we will have the exact appropriate date. So just ignore the dates and also ignore the total duration at the very top. So these are the different durations, and we can also see the payment module total duration is 5 days, which is not accurate since we have not created the engine for the schedule. Okay. So that is what we have done, is we have created or entered the duration for each and every activity, and we also have the dependencies, and we also have the relationship. So if we go back to the network diagram, so this is what we already have created. All right, and the next thing, once we have entered the duration, is we will now run the project schedule, and we'll also see that. Now remember one thing, that currently in the network diagram we have all arrows in black. So once we will run the project schedule, we'll have some arrows in different color which will represent the network critical path. Okay. So before we run the project schedule, let's do one more thing, that in each and every node of the network diagram we can see only the activity code and activity name. We can add some more information inside each node as well. So for that, what we can do, we can right click, and we can then go to activity network options, and we can add some further information as a quick preview. So we can click here on box template, and then we can click on add. So let's say we want to add the duration itself. Okay, so after the activity name, we'll select the activity name and we'll click on add button, and we can, from the drop down, we can select original duration and the dates. So let's add one more start date, so start, and one more, that will be the finish. All right, so we don't need to go back and forth to different views like table view and then to the network diagram. So we can see almost the same information in the network diagram view as well. So we can click OK, and you can also specify the height. For example, the height of activity name is a little bit bigger because it's 3. So if we just put it back to 1 as well, so we don't need bigger height for the activity name. I think that will be more than enough. So let's see. So we'll click OK, and again click OK. Let me zoom in. Okay, now yeah, height for the name is fine because the names are not very lengthy. So that's what we have here. We have the activity code, activity name, duration, and the dates. And remember that the dates are not accurate. So once we'll create the schedule, so we'll have the exact dates. And all right. So we have entered the duration, and what we will do, let's create the schedule. So let's go back to the table view, and we have all of these dates, we have the duration, everything is fine. Now we'll work on the project schedule. So for that, we'll click on the tools, and after tools we can click on schedule, or we can just press F9. And what we will do before we create the project schedule, there's one important thing, very important. So let me close this small window here, and that is what we call the data date. Okay, that's what we call the data date. So the data date means the date, the start of the execution. So the date on which we will start the execution, because we have only entered the durations. We have not entered like what's going to be the first day of execution, things like that. So what we will do, we'll go back to our project. So go to the project menu, go to the enterprise menu, and then click on the project, and from there we will select the project we are working on. So it's at the very bottom. So this is our project, and once you select your project, you go to the dates tab, and from the dates tab we have one section which is called the data date. Now the data date is going to be the first day of execution. So it is possible that currently you are in April, but you want your project to start in July, August, or maybe next year. So that's what the data date will be. So we'll click on the data date, and let's say the data date for the payment module, we want it to be on 9th of March, starting from April. So let's say from 13th of April, for example. So today is 6th of April. So let's say it will start on next Monday. So that would be 13th of April. So we'll select 13th of April. All right. And that's it. No need to click save or anything. Let's go back to the activity window. And now you will see that the very first activity will start on 13th of April, and then the next activity will have auto dates based on the duration of the previous or the next activities and so on. So we have selected the data date, and now we'll go back to tools and click on schedule, and the data date is already there, 13th of April, and we can just click here on schedule. So once you will click here on schedule, you will see these dates will change automatically. So click on schedule, and here we have the dates. Okay, so we have the dates. So our first activity was user interview, so that will start on 13th of April, will finish on 16th of April based on the duration, and then the next activity and so on. So that is the table view. Now if we go back to the network diagram, and let's just zoom in a little. All right. Okay, so we can see here that we have the duration. Now we have the dates as well. Before we had not the accurate dates. Now we have accurate dates. So 13th till 16th, the next one 16th till 19th, and then the next one from 20th, just 1 day duration, so we'll finish on 20th as well, and so on. Now we have the accurate dates as well. Okay, another thing you will notice here that we have some arrows which are in red color, okay, some in black color. Okay. Now the arrows which are in red color, so that represents basically the critical path. So what is the critical path? So let me show you the critical path. The critical path is this activity user interface, then the next finalize the scope, and then coming down purchase license. Okay, and then the next one, because now there is just single path, so DFD, then the next one, and not towards the quality control, but after coding, testing. Okay, and then moving on to the final one, the acceptance and the final approval. So any activity which is having the red arrow is on the critical path, and I will have a separate video explaining the concept of the critical path. So in that way it will be much more easier to understand. So again, for the time being, what we need to know that all of these red arrows, so these are all the critical path activities. And another thing, that the float on the critical path activities is always 0. So what is the float? Float is the amount of time an activity can be delayed without affecting the project deadline. Again, that will be explained separately in another video with full detail. So currently we just clicked on the schedule, and we have here the critical path and the project date. So let's go back to the table view, and we have all of that stuff ready. And if we go to another view, which is the Gantt chart. So in the Gantt chart, we'll also have similar type of information here. So let me zoom in. Okay, now again you can see in the Gantt chart as well. Now the width of the bar represents the duration in terms of days at the top. If that activity, or if the bar is in red color, which means that is the critical activity, and all the non-critical activities are having a different color. So that is the Gantt chart. And again, the first activity is the user interviews, and the last one we have is the final approval. Okay, so you can have a quick view for the whole module or for the whole project as well. So I have zoomed in one more time. So we have defined the duration for each activity, and we looked at the network diagram, and we have defined the critical path as well. So these are some of the things we need to perform in order to finalize the project schedule. But before we finalize the project schedule and we create the project schedule baseline, we need to assign the resources to each and every activity, and we may have to do different adjustments. For example, we will have to do the crashing or fast tracking. So these are the two important concepts in project scheduling. So that is what we will discuss in the next video with each and every detail, and then in the next video we will also finalize the project schedule.